Hear more about how to manage performance issues in the workplace. Kia ora, I'm Carolyn Young, Chief Executive of Retail NZ, and welcome to today's episode. This is part of our Empowering Retail series. I'm joined today by Yevgenya Chityan, who is our in-house business and HR advisors. Welcome, Yev.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, look, it's great to be here. And I think just a reminder with regard to employment relations issues, episode today is of a generic nature. The advice that we're giving is just in general. We're not providing specific advice that you should act on about circumstances in your business. HR and employment issues are extremely complicated, as we all know. And if you have some questions about a performance management issue as they relate to your business and your staff, please give Yev a call directly on 0800 472 472, where we can then provide you, well, Yev can provide you with specific advice about your circumstances. But Yev, look, one of the issues that you frequently get requests from members on is how they can best manage performance issues in the workplace. It's a really complicated space and it's hard to have those conversations. Tell us a little bit about what's the best approach to manage an employer who's not meeting expectations.
Yeah, it definitely can be really difficult to approach those situations. And I think first and foremost, ongoing feedback is the best way. That's how business owners and managers can really build those relationships with their employees and minimize performance issues over time. But if someone is not performing well, it's important to address it quickly. So within 1 to 2 days that you've noticed that their performance is off, have a chat with them. It should be somewhere private, away from customers and other staff, and give them a heads up. Hey, I'd like to talk to you. I would like to give you some feedback. And then once you're actually talking to them, start with something positive. I think you're doing this thing really well. I'd like to give you some feedback to help you do this other thing better. So you're showing support and empathy. You're saying something positive, but you're also making it clear that you have something constructive to say. And then when it comes to actually giving the feedback, be direct, because sometimes people try to be too nice and the person doesn't realize that they're receiving constructive feedback. So be clear, you're doing this thing, I need you to do something else. Tell them what you expect them to do and offer support. Do you need me to show you? Would you like me to train you? Do you understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Show that care, make sure to check their understanding.
So it's a time where Kiwis have to really reach outside their comfort zone. We do tend to be a little bit more standoffish and a little bit more humble about things. We don't like to be direct, right? But in these instances, when you're providing feedback to a staff meeting member who's not meeting your expectations, you've got to be really clear. And to be clear, be really precise about that issue and that hamburger philosophy, right? Something really good. What is the issues, then close with something good is really a great way to frame it up. And so,
Exactly.
when you provided that feedback, what should a manager or a business owner do if an employee isn't listening to that feedback or they have responded really poorly about the feedback that they've been given?
Well, like I said, I mean, you always want to offer your support. So offering them resources, assistance, that kind of thing, and give them some time to process, right? Because in the moment, sometimes they might just be jarred, but oh man, I just heard something really bad, So give them some time to process and maybe offer to check back in with them and see how they're going. But if you are having to talk to them a couple of times about the same thing, that's where you want to consider a few different things. One is if they were performing well, but suddenly they've dropped off, check in. Hey, what's going on? I've noticed that, something's going on with you. Are you okay? Do you need support? Whatever. And then reestablish the expectation. But sometimes it may be a matter of, hey, listen, we've had to talk to you a couple of times already. Now I've tried to give you some support and chance to improve, but if I have to have this conversation with you again, might have to escalate, might have to be some consequences. And what I suggest is if you're having the conversation 2 or 3 times, do a file note, or sometimes it can be like a letter of expectation where you're basically doing a written summary of this is what we discussed. This is the support I provided to you, or this is what the expectation was that we agreed to. And if this continues, if we have to have this conversation again, there could be further consequences. So, understandably, people aren't always going to react positively to feedback. And so the way that you give that feedback is important, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you're sticking to those expectations and that you are continuing to kind of escalate to make it clear that there's going to be some sort of boundaries, for how long you can tolerate underperformance.
Yeah, and having that written follow-up is also really supportive from an employer's perspective around what those expectations are, because it makes it really clear. And sometimes when you're under pressure and someone's giving you feedback, you may not hear it because you're concerned about what it might be saying. So at least if it's in writing as well, staff members have got an opportunity to then to read and absorb that in their own time. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things in employment relations we often talk about are PIPs, right? A performance improvement plan. How do businesses use those in an effective way to manage staff?
Yeah, performance improvement planning can be a very effective tool to help an employee improve their performance after those informal conversations haven't worked. So, what the employer needs to do is go through a formal process. So, you invite the employee to a meeting and you basically outline exactly what are those specific goals that they need to achieve. How long do they have to achieve those goals? Because you want to set some sort of structure around, we're giving you a deadline by which you need to improve these
Yeah.
things. You want to be very specific exactly how they're going to be evaluated. How are you going to measure, whether or not they're meeting those objectives? And then finally, what specific resources or supports are going to be needed in order to help them achieve those targets within that time frame. So you're going to want to document absolutely everything and have it signed because, again, it's a formal process. And it's really important for the employee to be actively involved and participate in this process. So, when it comes to figuring out what are the resources or supports that are going to help them succeed, ask them questions like, how do you learn? What do you think would be helpful to you? Do you need training? Do you need visual aids? Why do you think you haven't been doing well in this area? You really want them to buy into this process. That's going to be the best way to make this effective. And also through the performance improvement plan, you want to also be clear about what are the next steps. If by the end of this time frame that we've agreed to, if you're still not meeting those standards that we need from you, what's the next step? Is it a disciplinary process? Are we considering whether you're fit for the role? These are the kind of things that are going to need to be considered, and that has to be made clear to the employee. And you also want to make sure whatever targets you're setting for them are, measurable. So is it a specific sales number they need to be meeting? Is there a certain frequency that they need to, doing certain tasks? How many times a day? That kind of needs to be
Yeah.
something that you can actually measure, because otherwise, how are they going to know whether they're succeeding or not? And then through this process, the ongoing feedback is really important too. So if you're setting a time frame of, let's say, 3 months, you're going to need to meet with them throughout that time to let them know if they're on track to meeting those goals.
Fantastic. What if an employer has tried everything and the employer just isn't doing their job? What do they do next?
Yeah, it can be really tough, right? Because you sort of want to give them every opportunity to improve, give them all those resources and support. But ultimately, if they're just not able to meet the mark, you have to consider dismissal. And that does require basically the same process that you would do for misconduct. So you would have to have a formal meeting with them, and you would have to outline again exactly what those performance issues are and everything that you've done to try and help them. Look, we gave you some warnings, we've given you resources and support to improve. You have not been able to meet the standard. This is becoming an impact to our business, it's becoming a serious concern. And so we are proposing some type of disciplinary outcome. You're not going to be able to dismiss them right away, so it could be a written warning initially, but eventually the proposed outcome is going to be, look, we've lost confidence in you to meet the requirements of this role. We're proposing dismissal. One thing I just want to caution employers about is if the employee throughout at any point of this performance management process, if they make it known that they have health issues, including mental health issues that are directly impacting their performance, that immediately puts an additional obligation onto the employer to provide extra support. You may have to give them some more accommodations. You may have to give them more time, more resources, all that kind of thing, and even potentially adjust your expectations depending on the nature of their health issues. But it is something that is part of your good faith obligations and is a duty of care to support their well-being. You have to factor in any sort of health issues because that absolutely can impact an employee's performance.
Fantastic. Look, thank you so much, Yev. We know that you've been receiving a lot of calls through the advice line around issues around performance management. So hopefully people have able to understand a little bit more in a generic basis around what's involved. If you've got a specific issue with a staff member that you're looking to address, do give Yev a call on 0800 472 472. We're here to help you and support you through those processes because they are very complex, and having another ear and a helping hand is always really supportive. So thanks, Yev, for joining us today and giving us all of your advice and recommendations to retailers who are looking to address workplace performance issues. A special thanks to our New Zealand partners whose support enables us to keep you up to date with everything retail. I hope you enjoyed this episode and had a nice break with your coffee. Back to it now, but thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. And finally, don't forget to subscribe on your preferred channel so you can keep up to date with all the current industry knowledge. Until next time, ka kite anō, bye for now. Kia ora.